Hello and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. Now, every so often I come across a video where they say so much wrong stuff that it would take an incredibly long time to unpick and explain as to why it's wrong, and that wouldn't be a fun or snappy video. Because that's just not really the format of Hippie Hyena. If we don't go into great depth and explain things with, statistics and stuff. We leave that to other channels, of which there are many great ones, which you should check out. If you like the general breadtube stuff, they tend to have a lot of studies and that, and we don't really go into that because it can get a bit bogged down and not very funny and entertaining, and that's really kind of the main purpose of Hippie Hyena, really, is to point at laugh at dumb people. But I thought I might give it a go because I came across this video that is very, very dumb in a lot of ways, and it's kind of a short video, so let's see how it goes. I'll try and make my explanations snappy and clear. And so this video is from PragerU, and it's about titled "Killing Comedy." So let's see what they've got to say about that, shall we? There's probably going to be a lot of me jumping in on the tiniest of sentences because nearly every word this guy says is going to be wrong. So listen carefully, because at any moment I'm going to jump in, and there won't be a lot of time for you to really pay that much attention to what you're saying, and so it could get confusing, but hopefully it won't. Okay, here we go.
The world has become too absurd to be satirized.
Which is sort of true. Yeah, that's true. Not in the way that they think so, though. What they're basically going to be doing in this video is taking the common left-wing talking point that the right wing has become so absurd that they're basically a parody of themselves, and sort of flipping that over and trying to accuse the left of the same thing. And in order to do that, they're going to be very disingenuous, misrepresent the truth probably quite a lot, because it's not true. What they're saying isn't true. And it kind of is true when you got people who still think that Trump won the election, still don't believe in climate change, still think that the coronavirus was a hoax and refuse to wear masks, and think vaccines have microchips in. I mean, when you have that as a sort of basis for a political movement, the notion of calling the other side beyond satire is, well, it's beyond satire.
The great English writer G.K. Chesterton said that way back in 1911, long before math was considered racist and biological men were allowed to compete against women in sports.
Yes, he just said that maths was considered racist. By who? By literally no one is the answer. By literally no one. As we'll go on to find out. He also felt the need to have a little transphobic jab in there, as if the notion that gender was a social construct, which is backed up by all of science, and anyone who can think clearly can understand that almost immediately with absolute minutiae of thought put into it. It's just so stultifyingly obvious, only a complete moron wouldn't be able to see that, and equating that to some bogus idea that left-wing people don't like maths, which is completely absurd considering that, I mean, the whole right wing is based on trickle-down theory, so I really would be quiet about, maths, because you guys really don't understand it, or the dumb stuff about, not understanding how variable tax rates work. And this isn't a new thing. There's the whole thing of George W. Bush saying he was in the top 95th percentile of his class. This is a really common thing that the right wing really, really don't understand, let alone economics, but basic mathematical principles. And that's what this video is going to be, guys. A lot of projection, as per usual. Projection. There's so much projection in here, they could open up a chain of cinemas. Although, to be fair, they'd probably mishandle the books so badly they'd go bankrupt extremely quickly because they can't do maths. That was the joke.
One can only imagine what he would say if he were alive today. At the Babylon Bee, where we write satire for a living...
Debatable on that, because satire is defined as the use of humour, irony, exaggeration or ridicule to expose and criticise people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. And they failed on the first hurdle, the use of humour, because they don't have any.
We're feeling Chesterton's pain in a big way. Just look at these headlines that were satirical at the time we wrote them. On May 9th, 2017, we ran this headline. 2 + 2 = 4, insists closed-minded bigot.
And here I'm in the stupefying situation of having to explain a very unfunny joke and explain specifically what the joke is and why it's not funny. So they are saying, essentially with this joke, they're absurdizing their belief that people who say straight facts like 2 + 2 = 4 are being accused of being closed-minded bigots. So let's have a look at what closed-minded bigots are being accused of. Largely, they're being accused of being racist when they are racist. So kind of what the joke is that racism is as logical as 2 + 2 = 4, which it obviously isn't, but it seems as though it is to these sorts of idiots. It's basically a wolf whistle, and quite fundamentally, it's just not funny. It's just not funny at all. It's kind of that, it comes from that kind of Stephen Crowder school of comedy, which is just kind of whining about how you wish things were, and doing so with sort of perhaps a silly face or a wig or dressed as a lady. Like, it's not even really a joke. It's just trying to sort of make an analogous point. There's no sort of sense of surprise or, extremity in it. It's just kind of like stating what your political beliefs are. It's a very peculiar school of comedy, and I'd go so far as to say it's not comedy. It's just kind of bigotry masquerading as commentary. Like, wolf whistles aren't humour. So if it's not humour, then it's not satire, it's just propaganda. And to be frank, if that's the kind of comedy you're worried about getting killed, then kill it, because it's terrible. Oh dear. Why is it that all these people who are always interested in protecting Western culture, protecting white culture, the culture that they sort of hold up as being good is always seriously cringe and terrible. Just terrible. It's almost like a sort of recruitment for Al Qaeda. There's nothing that makes me more want to destroy Western culture than I see what they believe exemplifies it. It's a really bad advert.
That was a joke, of course.
Because the mark of truly great jokes is you have to explain that they were jokes. Otherwise, you might miss that they were jokes. You might miss the brilliance of the humour if someone didn't immediately afterwards say, that was a joke, by the way, that I just said that was a joke. I was like, oh, okay, that was a joke, was it? Oh, ha 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 ha.
But on August 10th, 2020, the Washington Examiner published this story. Math professor claims equation 2 + 2 = 4 reeks of white supremacist patriarchy.
That article is still up online. You can search it. I did on Google. And if you read a bit more than just the headline, as I did, I was about to say to research this video. I don't really research these videos. I wouldn't call doing a 3-second Google search research. It doesn't count as research, just reading an article quickly. Even though that's 10 times more research than this guy did for the entire video he's getting paid to do. Well, I'm not getting paid to do this because my channel doesn't have enough viewers to be monetized yet. Which I'm not bitter about at all. Yeah, but if you read the actual article, you'd very soon realise that that's not what the professor said at all. It's an incredibly misleading headline for clickbait purposes. There is no professor I think you could find, at least anyone that isn't completely insane in a sort of Jordan Peterson type way, that would argue that 2 + 2 = 4 is white supremacy. Because that's nonsense, clearly. It's so clearly nonsense. It's astounding. It's astounding that PragerU expects its viewers to believe that anyone would believe that. But here we are. What it is obviously actually about is the notion that's a bit more complicated, that data and how you collect and present that data in different contexts can be used to express a certain bias. And you cannot say that data in its own right is neutral because somebody has collected it and they've collected it in a particular way and they're presenting it in a particular way. As in a sense this article kind of shows, because they collected the data of somebody explaining this and presented it in the biased way of pretending that some professor was saying that 2 + 2 = 4 is white supremacist when they didn't. Because how it's presented is very important. And also how it's gathered, of course. It's nuanced, it's a bit more complicated, but that's what the world actually is. But this is in general what the right do, isn't it? They take some kind of information and then strip it of all nuance, all the actual meaning, and just replace it with spectacle-based blah, blah, blah to try and rile people up into a ludicrous old man shouting at clouds strop out.
On August 13th, 2020, we ran this headline: BLM rioters awarded Nobel Peace Prize. At the time, we thought this was obvious satire, but on January 29th, 2021, this story was published in The Guardian. Black Lives Matter movement nominated for Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, there's a very important distinction between those two things, isn't it? It's the word rioters. The word rioters. You know, back in the days of Martin Luther King, the civil rights protests, there were also some riots. And at the time, the right wing tried to paint all of the civil rights movement with the same brush as the rioters, presenting them as essentially domestic terrorists in order to downplay their very legitimate concerns and unfairnesses that black people in that time were subjected to. And now exactly the same thing is happening again. They're trying to conflate the rioters with the entire movement and just kind of push black people's voices under the rug, largely because they just don't believe that Black Lives Matter. It's a great name for that organisation because it perfectly sums up what it's about, and it also perfectly sums up what it's opposed to. Large numbers of people who surprisingly in this day and age, in 2021, the year of our Lord, still think that black people's lives are somehow worth less than white people's.
On March 25th, 2020, we ran this headline: Pants sales plummet as everyone working from home. The very next day, this story appeared in Yahoo Finance. Amid coronavirus, Walmart says it's seeing increased sales of tops, but not bottoms.
I mean, that's not so much a case of the world becoming more absurd. It's more of a case of you guys just being woefully unoriginal and unfunny. That is like the most boomery, unfunny, lame dad joke I've ever heard.
Oh, wouldn't it be funny if people working on Zoom calls weren't wearing any trousers at the time?
God damn it, man. It's just so insulting to cough that lump of unfunny after your poor readers. I mean, I kind of feel like if anyone laughed at that, if anyone even raised a smile at that joke, they need to be checked for some kind of mental problem. Must be something seriously wrong with your brain if that is what is passing for satire. He said he runs a satire site. He thinks it's satire to be people might not wear trousers when you can't. I mean, God, blimey. You know, this is a recycled joke that was about newsreaders from the 30s or something, you know, and it wasn't even funny then. Bloody hell.
Almost anything we publish now ends up being believable.
Yeah, but that doesn't say anything about the world being absurd. It just says something about how dumb your readers are. They'll believe any old slop you serve up to them. You know, you're just blatantly insulting your readership here. It's a serious self-own.
And much of it ends up actually coming true, as you've just seen.
No, as we've just seen, that it doesn't come true. It's just that, your readership is dumb enough to believe that it has because they're really, really, really dumb. And, just read headlines instead of, articles and swallow propaganda as if it's, I don't know what, thinking that it's in the place of humour. I mean, for God's sake, go watch some, Nathan For You or the Eric Andre show or something. There are clips on YouTube. It'll blow your mind. What actual humor actually is, because this ain't it.
This is exactly what Chesterton was talking about. It's one of the ways the left is killing satire, by turning reality into a parody of itself.
Says the people who just literally voted in 2016 a orange Biff Tannen from the Back to the Future movies. I mean, the Back to the Future movies weren't even supposed to be satire. They're just goofball comedy. And you literally went and found an aging jelly baby of an 80s high school bully stereotype and elected him president, where he quoted Hitler on a regular basis. And you say our side is becoming so absurd and a parody. What the hell are you talking about? Yeah, your side is becoming a parody because you're saying that, like, people deserve a living wage and, like, healthcare. That's completely absurd. Whereas we say that, like, the coronavirus isn't real, but can simultaneously be cured by worm medicine for fish. Either that or putting a UV light up your bunghole. Like, I literally have a YouTube channel where all I do is show what you guys are, like, saying and doing for comedy purposes. Because it's so over the top ridiculous. I do some commentary, but I don't really have to. It would still be funny if I didn't. So, what can we learn from this video? Well, we can learn that there is literally no left-wing talking point that the right won't try and steal, use the language of, and twist into something that they think is true to support their side, no matter how objectively absurd that might be. And this is like a really like meta video in the sense of like the notion that the left wing have become so absurd that they are now beyond satire is such an absurd idea that anyone espousing it is now themselves beyond satire. And the fact that they would steal that talking point from the left and use it is so absurd it's beyond satire. It is a parody. It's parody. We now live in a world where the right wing is just parody. And to be frank, it should probably be treated as such. Like, you know, in the past when sort of there'd be sort of idiot flat earthers or people like that, they'd be sort of laughed out of the room. And that seems to me to be the appropriate response to the political version of flat earth theory, which is the right wing, obviously. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Look after yourselves and each other. Goodbye.